Good afternoon, my friends. It's Simon Lamb here from Two-Way Digital, and today we're going to be talking about website speed, so the page speed on your website. So if you're live, give me a shout. I'll give you a shout out. If you want to replay, give me a hashtag replay below. If you've got any questions at the end, please do feel free to ask. More than happy to help. So let's crack on. So website speed. So when we're talking about website speed, it's essentially how fast your page loads, and that has a number of factors that can affect that. It could be potentially the host, the platform you're on. But to actually measure the speed, there are a couple of tools that are available now. There are always free tools, there are paid tools. And if you've been following along on the videos and you've set up some of the stuff that we've already talked about, particularly if you've got a WordPress site, Google Sitekit actually contains within it a link to Google's page speeds analyzing tool. So if you've installed Sitekit and you've set that up, just go to the dashboard in Sitekit, scroll down to the bottom of the dashboard page, and it will actually give you some analysis on your website speed, and it will give you some recommendations to fix those if any are needed. Now, aside from using Sitekit and Google Page Analysis, there's also a tool from a company called GT Metrix. I'll put a link in the blog post for that, and you can get a link to the blog post below the video after I've finished and it's been published. But essentially, it does a similar thing to what Google PageSpeed does. Now, one quick tip is if you do use GT Metrix and you're in the UK, as I am, then what you probably want to do is, before you use the free tool, is create an account, because the default from being not logged in and analyzing your website, it will use a default server, I think in Canada or possibly the US. And so that will skew the results slightly. So if you log in with a free account, you can set the server to be in London that it tests from, and that will give a slightly more accurate representation of other people in the UK that will get. So if your server is hosted in the States and it tests from the States, that won't be the same experience as people will get from the UK. It'll be slightly slower. So if you set the testing server in the UK, then that will give you a more accurate representation of the results. Now, following the steps and the guidelines that each of these tools gives is obviously going to help the page speed load. So lots of things that can affect that, but one of the things that you need to think about when you're creating pages, your website, the layouts, etc., is really you've got to have a mobile first mentality. It's been the case now, I think, in the 2018, maybe 2019, that actually the search traffic on the internet went over 50% to mobile users. So more than half of the people coming to your website will have done a search from a mobile device to get there. And if you're just completely optimized for desktop PCs or laptops, then potentially you could have some problems and you may not be aware of them. So when you're creating your website, you do need to check it on mobile devices to make sure that it's easy to navigate, that it doesn't take too long to load. Part of SEO is optimizing everything, and on page SEO, part of that is also optimizing images, making sure they're not too big. And this is something that I see with a lot of estate agents when I look at their websites for the first time, and they've not been given any advice, and they've just put up pictures from their latest property. They do take a bit of time to load sometimes. Now, I often view them on desktop, and I've got a very, very fast broadband connection, but when you do the same on a mobile, they're really, really slow, and it's a real huge data sucker, because some of these photos are huge. They're megabytes in size, and they've not been optimized for web viewing. Now, that's great if you want to zoom in and see the door number of a picture that's been taken from the road, but it's just not necessary to have large images on your website. So that is something that it will get pointed out in the tools if you've got huge amounts of data taken up by pictures on properties that are on your website. Now, there are lots of things that can affect page speed. It's not just big pictures or having things not set up quite right. It could be the web host that your website is actually hosted on. If you're on a shared platform, which most are these days, then it could potentially be a problem and quite slow there. Not having caching for static objects and things like that can be a problem that can be easily solved, but if you're not using it, it's going to slow down because everything has to be downloaded every time somebody sees your website or comes to your website. Mediocre coding, poor plugins, badly written plugins. Obviously, like I say, the big file size is one thing. Too many requests. So if you've got a lot of HTTP requests in your website, that can cause issues in terms of speed with redirects and stuff. One of the ways that you can really help speed up a website, particularly if you're on a slow platform, is using a CDN, a content delivery network. And Amazon, Cloudflare, they have free options that you can use for that. Something else that a lot of people won't necessarily think of, but if you've got content on your site and somebody hot links to it from another website, that's potentially using up resources and bandwidth on your website, and so that can slow you down as well. Keep alive packets are something that can be used to make sure that the website's always available and ready to go. And obviously, things that people never think of is things like malware and having your site hacked and things like that, and having nefarious usage of your site that you maybe haven't spotted. So having good security and good best practice usage of your website and development, etc., is all really good things to keep in mind about using your website. Now, you can obviously scan for malicious code and various things, but you've got to remember that that's something that for most websites is not necessarily built in. It's not an option that comes for free with a lot of hosts, and it is something that you have to have an awareness of just to make sure that you do that. And even if you're using free tools to do the scanning and not necessarily going for a paid option, you've still got to set them up. So bear that in mind, because that can have obviously a big impact from a page loading point of view. And if your pages don't load fast, then it causes you a couple of problems. So first of all is, if a lot of people are mobile, they might be out and about, they could be using their data. So big sites that take a long time to load, people are going to click away from because they're just not going to wait for them. If they're not very responsive, or if they're not easily navigable, then people won't stick around very long. If it's difficult to get around, like I say, if the navigation isn't there, the user experience is poor overall, people can't easily find what they want and move around your site. Even if people want the information you've got, they're probably not going to stick around very long to try and find it. So all of this, loading time and ease of use and good layouts for mobile, etc., are all going to have a big impact, because if people keep coming to your site and clicking away before the pages load, or they've read anything, or all this, the search engines are going to notice, and they're going to assume largely that it's because you don't have what people want, not because your site's not responsive or not very easily navigable. So all of those will have an impact over time on your rankings, because all the search engine is essentially going to see is people aren't sticking around on your site, they're not reading what you've got, they're not clicking, looking at other stuff, they're not going to be commenting or sharing or liking anything. So really it's going to hurt you quite a lot in the long term. So it's really important that you make sure that not only is your site fast, but it's also mobile friendly. So go and use the tools, GT Metrix or Google's page speed insights, and follow the recommendations, get things fixed up. Now, there may be some stuff in there that you don't know what they're talking about. If that's the case, feel free to ask a question in the group, more than happy to help. Obviously, doing a Google search on these things will also give you loads and loads of information. But if you get stuck, just join the group. The link's in the post below, and you're more than welcome to come in and ask away. So that's it for page speed. Make sure you do the analysis, make sure that you fix all the problems, and then I'll see you in the next video. So until then, have a good afternoon, enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye for now.